夠鐘有夠法定人數，而家我哋係根據西九文化區管理局條例第601章第37條提出嘅擬議決議案小組委員會主席嘅選舉，咁就根據內務守則第22條同埋附錄4嘅選舉程序呢，而家請委員提名主席一職人選，有效提名由一名委員口頭作出，並且最少得到另一名委員口頭附議嚇。李慧瓊議員，
你好，我提議鍾樹根。
係有冇委員和議？謝偉銓議員，跟住我哋團長謝偉銓議員，係就和議嚇，咁就鍾樹根議員接唔接受？
接受。
好，有冇其他嘅提名？冇，咁我就交個位俾鍾樹根議員啦。
我想問下各位使唔使選副主席呢？有冇需要選副主席啊？如果冇需要呢，咁我哋就唔選啦嚇。咁我進入議程，多謝大家嘅支持提名嚇。我哋請政府官員入嚟啦。係。係，唔好嚇我啊！嚇。
排唔排到隊㗎？
我動議到，但係排唔排到隊咧，即係要睇大家嘅提問啦，同埋個會議嘅進程，都係秘書講講。
應該政府當局已經撤回咗佢準備3月16號提出呢個決議案喎。
我撤回咗㗎啦，冇日子嘅而家。
係冇日子，因為我哋要審完呢個係
審完先啦。
明白，
先可以再。
所以冇呢個問題嘅，我哋慢慢嚟都得嘅，即係。
唔好玩我啊，心血少啊嚇。OK， 歡迎西九管理局同埋我哋民政局嘅同事同埋政府同事出席今日嘅會議。咁咧有一個 PowerPoint 咧就派緊俾大家，同埋有關嘅部門或者西九嘅代表會介紹呢個 PowerPoint 嘅嚇。咁我哋而家開始先啦嘛，爭取時間。邊位介紹啊 ？Welcome Donald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll just take you through this. I thought it would be useful just to set the scene. I know some members are familiar with what's happened before, but quite a lot's happened since the last time we talked, so I thought I'd just bring us all up to date, same page, and that'll help us. Obviously, we're here to talk about the public open space bylaws. They are drafted under Section 37(1) of the Ordinance, which allows us to create the bylaws. And of course, they all have to be approved by the Legislative Council, in this case through positive vetting. It's perhaps worth recapping the reason why we're doing the bylaws in the first place. And this is something which I think isn't necessarily obvious, but it was in response to the Subcommittee on Public Health and Municipal Services Ordinance bylaws amendments, where we were requested to put together bylaws to help facilitate the operation of the public open space and the park. In doing so, we took regard to the fact that these bylaws will apply throughout the district and not just in the park area, and I think that's important to bear that in mind. So as we gradually develop the area within the district, the bylaws will be rolled out and increasingly apply throughout. But primarily at this stage, we're looking at the area, depending on how quickly the bylaws are enacted, which we call the nursery park, which, if members have recollection, this is the area surrounded that rather large circle on the diagram. But in due course, as the park, which is the area below that, is developed, these will then apply to that area as well. the principles, and I think this is also important. The guiding principle and the philosophy that we're using is that we want the public open space to be as open and as accessible as possible throughout. So the concept is that we want to have this open space to inspire, promote and encourage cultural pursuits for all. And I emphasize cultural pursuits here because obviously we want it to support the basic objective of the cultural district as a whole. In doing so, of course, we do need to have minimum powers to manage the public open space itself in order to ensure that the open space is available for all on a fair basis and it can be used safely. In drafting the bylaws, we have made reference to both local and overseas legislation. I'm not going to go through this in great detail, except to demonstrate that we have tried to ensure that where possible, we've used references that are relevant to our philosophy and approach. So let me very quickly run us through the key elements. Primarily, we believe that the purpose of the proposed bylaw is to ensure public safety, order and health. We do have to have regard to the environment, and we also have to allow for the smooth conduct of cultural activities within the public open spaces. In looking at this, we've taken a view quite early on in response to public suggestions that we should allow domestic animals, and this basically we mean dogs, cats, that sort of thing. People do bring birds in. We're not talking about alligators and buffalo and that sort of operation. It is something which we feel that people should be allowed to do, and we will welcome those. But of course, you do have to control them, and the bylaws provide for suitable controls. Minimum restrictions on public conduct. Again, I think this is basically a sensible issue. We don't want to see people causing nuisance or annoyance to others. They don't want to see damage to the public open space and environment, or that may cause danger to other users. So we need to be able to step in where necessary to deal with those sort of issues. Other key elements. Delineation of restricted and closed areas, and this means things like areas that might need to be closed off for maintenance purposes, areas that might be closed off for back-of-house operations, storage of mechanical equipment, that sort of area, plus, of course, where we may have events that need to be controlled. We've had already many events in the existing nursery park, and we really understand now how you have to control areas just for safety. If you have 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 people in a park, you need to ensure that they can do so safely. So we need to be able to control that. Of course, we need enforcement powers and penalties, and we need to be able to authorize persons with suitable power to enforce the provisions, particularly on types of conduct. Where there are breaches of the bylaws, of course, there must be some sort of penalties for contravention, and that is also provided for. Public consultation. This was an important part of both the preparatory process for the drafting of the bylaws as well as the review process as we developed the bylaws. We took it forward on this basis of a park we share and carried out a public survey on the operation of the future park by the consultation panel. That took place in May and June of 2014. We also obviously consulted the LegCo Joint Subcommittee, the Yau Chi Mong District Council. We're in regular dialogue with the Harbourfront Commission, as well as we held a town hall meeting chaired by the chairman with all district councils in attendance. Beyond that, for specific issues, for example, street performers, youth groups, pets, animals, that sort of thing, we spoke to individual groups and associations, including street performers, particularly the nearby residents. We felt it was important that they had an opportunity to discuss these with us. Youth groups, professional institutions, as well as the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. One of the key things that came across through this exercise, and it was an extensive exercise over many months, was that there was a strong feeling the bylaws should be minimal, to allow freedom for diverse park users with discretion to be executed flexibly. And we fully subscribe to that approach, and we hope the bylaws as drafted do reflect that approach. So that's as far as I want to go at the moment, Mr. Chairman. We're very, very happy to answer members' questions and stand ready to respond. Thank you.
OK， 跟住落嚟咧，我哋就進行諮詢。而家有舉咗手咧，就有梁家傑、蔣麗芸，仲有冇其他同事舉手？咁首先梁家傑，每人4分鐘，連問連答。
Thank you, Chairman. There is only one thing that I want to raise at this moment. I'm sure Mr. Pescott and his legal team must be well versed with the desire of members of the WKCDA joint panel for a mission statement to be included in the bylaws. Now, I understand from the Legislative Council Secretariat that the WKCDA took the view after consulting lawyers that such a mission statement was not possible. But if I may just clarify with Mr. Pescott and his legal team, why is that so? If you look at Chapter 601 itself, under Section 4, entitled Functions of Authority, you will find in subsection 2, well, subsection 1 first, that sets out the functions of the authority from A to G. And then in bracket 2, subsection 2, it says the authority shall perform its functions under subsection 1 in ways which aim to achieve the following objectives. And I emphasize the word objectives. May I inquire why it is the case that you can't adopt a similar formulation in the drafting of the bylaws so that we can be sure about the objectives of the bylaws that would include, for example, that it is the objective that the use of public open space should be open, accessible wherever possible. The mission for the public open spaces is to inspire, promote, and encourage cultural pursuits for all. Minimum powers for managing the public open spaces itself, etc. Chairman.
Okay, Pesco.
I'll start and then I'll ask Mike to chip in. In fact, when we did the first draft, after we did that discussion in the subcommittee, we did prepare a draft with the relevant preamble. When it was submitted to the Department of Justice for vetting, as these things always are, we were advised that it was not the normal protocol in terms of this sort of drafting to include it. Obviously, we're aware of members' strong view on this and felt that in view of that conflict, we would try and deal with it in the guidelines. So that's the approach that we've taken to get the spirit of what members wanted included, but obviously recognising the advice that we'd received from the Department of Justice. Mike, do you want to chip in on
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I have limited time. Mr. Pescott must be well aware that my question was very focused. I was drawing a comparison between the bylaws that are now being tabled and Section 4 of Chapter 601, the principal legislation itself.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, Pascal.
If I could just add, one of the points that Department of Justice Legal Drafting Division made was that there was no need to include the statement in the bylaw because it was already contained in the main legislation in the ordinance. we felt constrained by DOJ's advice.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, from the attendance list, I do not see the Department of Justice being represented today at this Bills Committee. If I may state for the record, so that the Secretariat can let the DOJ know that I am not accepting that as an answer. Perhaps on the next occasion when we meet, we can ask the DOJ to be represented, and before that, better still, they can provide us first with a written reply to my query. Okay. I hope the Secretary already got my point, that I am here drawing a comparison to Section 4, particularly Section 4(2) of the Principal Ordinance.
OK， 好，咁我諗書面答覆你啦，嚇。下一位就蔣麗芸。
唔該，主席。我係歡迎呢，就係今次嗰個公眾休憩用地咧，其中個休憩用地咧，其中個基本原則咧就會盡量開放同埋通達啦。咁呢個係好事。咁咧就而我亦都係歡迎咧，即係當中睇到咧就係有啲家居嘅動物咧都能夠係呢個參與呢個休憩用地嘅即係可以去休憩用地。咁不過咧就有一點咧，我就希望咧就要注意嘅，會唔會講清楚咧？就因為咧大家講緊家居動物，可能都係主要都係狗仔啦 ，OK？ 咁就呢一樣嘢咧就要講清楚啦，因為咧就香港嘅動物同埋即係嗰個有好多家庭係冇養動物嘅。而當啲家庭一家大細咧，去到呢一啲休憩嘅地方度行啊，咁你亦都有動物行啊，咁咧就有時咧小朋友咧係有啲會驚啦，驚有個反應嘅話咧，反而好容易令到嗰啲動物嗰個覺得你會唔會係攻擊我啊咁嚇？即係即係香港出現都幾多咧，就係小朋友俾啲狗仔咬嘅，狗咬。所以咧，我就希望咧，大家諗深一層，就係咪開放所有嘅家居動物咧？咁嗱，而家你知道有啲家居養嗰啲有啲狗咧係好大隻嘅嗰啲叫做咩西藏獒犬係嘛咁佢都係屬於係家居動物係咪咧？咁亦都有啲咧養嗰啲叫大隻嗰啲叫咩丹麥狗係嘛？嗰啲係好大隻，咁呢啲咧就呢啲可以咧，即係喺某個程度嚟講咧，係即係可以係對萬一因為人嘅行為或者四周圍嘅行為而令到隻狗突然間發狂嘅話咧，係絕對可以嚴重傷害到人身嘅。咁所以喺呢一度咧，我覺得我哋要考慮多啲。但係我原則上係歡迎細狗仔，我覺得可以試行下嘅。我覺得呢樣嘢唔出可以考慮嘅小型嘅狗，但係對於大型嘅狗，我係絕對有保留嘅。咁另外咧，我就想問下咧，就有關街頭表演者啦。OK， 咁呢一度我哋會唔會呢個因為我哋盡量係開放啦。OK， 咁個街頭表演者喺裏邊個規範如何咧？係咪佢可以去到某一個角落位咁佢就可以坐低就可以表演音樂咧？咁會唔會有啲規範咧？咁因為你唔記得，我哋隔離咧就有好多住宅，係嘛？咁嗰啲住宅咧，即係一到即係可能會係某程度會唔會干擾到人哋咧？咁嗱，呢一樣嘢要諗清楚。咁咧就另外咧，我亦都想知道咧，嗱咁就我哋個開放時間會唔會考慮咧？即係譬如話我係咪24小時開放嘅？定係咧就會有一段時間會有啲限制嘅，特別深夜時間嘅咁。咁可唔可以喺度即係初步諗法如何咧？我都想知道下。唔該。
Mr. Duncan.
Thank you. The point on dogs is actually well taken. we have a designated free-range area where dogs can be allowed off the leash, but it's separated from the rest of the park. And we expect that to continue. Within the park, the requirement is that dogs must be under the control of their pet owner or whoever's walking the dogs. Our ambassadors, and we've been operating the park now for 8 months, do draw this to the attention of the users of the park, and we've not had any problems at all. I'm very pleased to say that. And we've had large dogs and small dogs, because the emphasis is always on safety. At all times we want dogs to be under control. That usually means they must be on a leash. They must be able to be reined in at all times. So that's the first principle. Having said that, it's not just about dogs. We've had all sorts of animals brought in, as I say, birds, and I saw a hamster or something being brought in by children before. It's all sorts of pets, but all of them must be under the control of the keeper of that particular pet. So that point is well taken. In terms of street performers, Lisa can probably answer in more detail if you need that, but there are designated locations within the park, and there will be in future within the area. There are restrictions on the type of amplification that people can use so that they cannot disturb people. There will be restrictions on the duration, so they can't stay in one place for 6-7 hours, because of course that can also be very irritating if they're singing one song over and over again, so they are required to move on. There are restrictions, for example, on emergency vehicular access areas. They cannot be located in those areas. If an emergency vehicle comes, they must be able to remove their equipment within 2 or 3 minutes. So there are very clear guidelines that are issued and published already, which are on our website, that we are working with the street performers, and we can provide those if the member's interested.
Okay.
In terms of potential nuisance to residents, I don't expect that because of the long distance from the residential areas. It really is a long, long way, so I don't anticipate any problems. The final issue, opening hours, yes, we intend it to be open 24/7. We feel that that's what the public demands and expects of us. But of course, within that, certain areas may be controlled access for operational reasons or for hiring reasons.
OK， 跟住陳志全議。
多謝主席。首先我想問翻，都係一個程序嘅問題。咁我知道政府係即係撤回咗3月16號要動議呢一個議案啦，咁就等我哋嘅委員會處理咗呢條法案。但係大家知道，因為呢條係一個附屬法例啦，咁根據議事規則第18條咧，佢嘅優先次序咧就會喺法案之後嘅。咁即係話咧，而家因為立法會有好多法案累積咗喺度啦，如果咧要做附屬法例咧，可能就要再用議事規則，即係再一次動議91條去停咗18條，跟住先至可以先做。我想問下秘書長，你有冇時間表？因為我聽緊有啲非法案咧，即係唔合法，即係唔係法案咧，佢個優先次序好低，甚至咧會有個心理準備會被犧牲嘅，即係如果排唔到，咁我哋呢條有冇一個咁嘅諗法咧？第二個問題呢，就係關於其實今日嘅 PowerPoint 都有講，就話呢一個西九嘅呢個地方會用最低程度嘅權力管理，會係最低程度權力管理嘅公眾休憩用地。呢個我想政府或者西九去可以解釋多少少。如果呢個講法應該係對比於其他康文署所管轄嘅呢啲叫做公眾休憩地方啦，咁西九係點樣俾佢哋係嗰個權力管理嘅程度係低呢？至於第3條問題呢，就係關於公廁嘅問題。其實喺今次嘅法例裏邊第6部第16咧都有講進入公廁嘅問題。我哋喺西九嗰個小組曾經都問過，就係話西九文化區會唔會設立無分性別嘅洗手間啊？嗱，我希望官員或者西九嘅負責人可以分得清楚，無分性別嘅洗手間同殘疾人士所用嘅洗手間係有本質上嘅唔同嘅。但係你話迫於無奈，如果冇佢又唔想入男唔想入女，佢迫於無奈會用殘疾人士洗手間。但係實際上邊呢，亦都唔係話為跨性別人士嘅，其實係一個家庭友善政策。我曾經真係見過有一個男士一個伯伯，咁佢喺個廁所嗰度呢，就摸嚟摸去揾唔到個出口，揾唔到個門啊！咁我就話點解個失明嘅人士佢唔帶嗰 嗰個首長呢，咁原來佢呢係有佢囡囡陪佢去嗰個地方，但係因為佢囡囡入唔到去嗰個男廁嗰度啦，咁所以喺男廁嗰度佢就即係周圍好似碰車咁周圍撞嚟撞去，咁我就帶佢即係出翻去就見翻佢囡囡。咁其實而家啲現代或者進步嘅地方，我西九應該嗰個進步嘅地方啦，而家高山劇場啊，陳茂波都走嚟同我講，喂，我哋而家有無分性別洗手間啦咁樣，咁即係好威咁啦，即係話終於有啦咁。我話咁西九未來可唔可以有呢？因為而家條法例就5歲以下即係可以進入異性洗手間啦。咁但係大啲即係個女想帶個老豆入去，就唔知帶男廁女廁就一定係犯法㗎啦。咁所以我哋都係好希望可以考慮設置無分性別洗手間，除咗方便跨性別人士，亦都係方便一啲家庭一啲自己獨立用廁所有困難嘅朋友咯。
Okay, Mr. Pascoe.
I'll deal with the last two. I presume the Secretary will deal with the first one. Yes, there will be family toilets, which will be unisex. I think that's an important point that we learned from the members' comments previously. I absolutely agree. There are circumstances where, males need to be accompanied by females if they're blind, if they're not just disabled. They may be mentally disabled, for example, they may need assistance. So we've recognised that there will be those provisions within the park. That's something that we've certainly taken advice from members on. In terms of the minimum powers, well, that's what we're trying to set out in this bylaw. What we regard as the least number of regulations to allow us to operate the park and the open space for the benefit of the public. So, for example, we're trying to ensure that, as we already do, that we don't have an approach which requires security guards. We're using park ambassadors, so we have a low touch. So instead of saying you cannot do something, we go up and say, you're disturbing your neighbours. Is it possible for you to move a little bit? Is it possible for you to change your behaviour? We're trying that low-key approach, and it seems to be working very well so far. We've not had any particular difficulty with that approach in the existing nursery park, so we believe it will work. But the specific provisions obviously are in the bylaw, and we'll discuss those as we go through the bylaw in detail.
OK， 民政局都答埋嗰個上會嗰個時間表。
關於嗰個程序問題呢，陳議員講得啱嘅，因為立法會係同意咗成立呢一個委員會去審議呢一個附例呢，民政事務局局長已經撤回咗嗰個決議案嗰個動議㗎啦。咁我哋就希望喺呢個委員會度嘅時候，我都可以向委員解釋，亦都多謝委員對呢個附例嘅關注。我哋嘅時間表呢，都係希望可以喺今個立法年度呢，都係可以完成嘅。咁即係希望我哋喺呢個會度講解多啲嘅時候，都希望委員支持我哋呢幾條附例啦。係咪我哋如果譬如完成啦呢個，譬如我哋開幾多次會咯，完成咗之後，你會用一個議事程序，會確保佢今個年度可以處理呢？你有冇個優先次序呢？你呢條附例？我哋都係要跟翻嗰個議事規則去
排隊啦。咁你哋幫手啦。OK， 問嘅同事問晒，仲有冇同事問？唔好意思，睇漏咗你。唔緊要，我都照問嘅，實俾時間問。
即係都唔使限時間啦，得2個。四分鐘啦，嘟下你啦，提醒你。咁你唔好，你不如俾我哋即係一個對話完整整啦嚇。你而家繼續啦，議事。我係想問嗰個執行即係執法嗰個機制嘅。其實呢件事呢，就係涂謹申議員呢，就之前都問過㗎啦。喺西九嗰度呢，即係你西九自己係冇一個武裝部隊㗎嘛。係嘛？係只係有獲授權人士嘅啫，同埋即係我估你最多都係揾保安公司嚟幫你做嘅。咁但係呢，你前邊就有好多好多唔準咁。好啦，去到後邊執行嗰度呢，就同埋釋義嗰度呢，都只係話獲授權人士。咁我想問管理局呢，究竟呢批獲授權人士係乜嘢人呢？即係會唔會好似良景村嗰度揾咗啲孔武有力嘅人走嚟趕小販，又叫做保安，又搞到又有即係嗰批人同村民有衝突啊，然後又係要叫警察嚟咁係嘛？定抑或係即係你會交俾食環署，定抑或係交俾警察去做呢？邊啲係呢啲獲授權人士呢？同埋喺即係呢條附例嘅第10部嗰度呢，都有執行呢度嘅。 咁呢個第23條嘅執行第5嗰度呢，就講明佢需要時係可以使用合理武力。咁嗱，乜嘢叫做合理武力呢？大家真係唔係好明白嘅啫喎，中文英文都都要講得非常之清楚。咁如果係合理武力嘅時候，你係咪揾外判咗揾個警衛公司，你就俾佢用佢認為嘅合理武力呢？你有冇一啲守則啊、訓練啊各樣嘢？同埋呢度你講明後邊第7嗰度呢，就講明呢啲獲授權人士同警隊係有分別嘅，因為你講咗話喺將呢啲人犯規嘅人交俾警務人員羈押之前呢，呢啲獲授權人士係可以扣留佢嘅。咁呢個程序就同我哋立法會差唔多啦。但係我哋立法會都要向公眾交代，我哋好多守則啊，各樣嘢都係寫得好清楚。我哋亦都唔會出胡椒噴霧啊，亦都唔會有警棍啊，各樣嘢係嘛？咁但係呢度，我覺得管理局你要同我哋解釋得翻好清楚，獲授權人士究竟係咩人嚇？呢度所謂嘅合理武力係什麼合理武力咯
？Okay, Mr. Pesco, please.
Thank you. Let me make it very, very clear here. We're not talking about armed personnel in any shape or form. The only people who would ever be armed in the park, as far as I'm concerned, are police officers. And they would be exercising their function under their own powers. They don't need these bylaws. These bylaws are to allow us to appoint people who are working for us. They will be properly identified. At the moment, we have what we call park ambassadors. They wear a uniform. It's very simple, but it's very clearly identified who they are. The powers are very limited. They can, at most, require a person to accompany them to the park office or a police station, but that's at most. The whole philosophy is that we avoid confrontation. We don't want to end up in a battle. That's not the purpose of a park or an open space. So the authorised people may be people we employ or people that we appoint. For example, as you said, security guards, we may have some. They will certainly not be distinguished by being heavies, as you put it. The whole concept of this is that while you have bylaws, you have to have the ability to enforce them. But our approach, as I've said before, is to try to deal with issues on a discussion basis. We're not trying to confront people and cause problems. However, if people are, for example, damaging property or causing problems for other park users, you have to be able to step in and take action where it's appropriate. But at all times, that must be with the minimum necessary force. Now, what you mean by minimum necessary force will be set out in published guidelines, as they would for any public operation, so that the public will know exactly what we mean. And those are things that we're working on at the moment. In terms of Section 7 that you particularly identified under 23 subsection 7, require them to accompany the authorised person to the office or to detain the person is basically to allow us to take a situation and remove the people that are causing the problem from that situation. But beyond that, we will have no power to take further action. So that's very clear and it will be set out in the guidelines that we'll be issuing separately.
Okay. 主席，我就要跟進嘅呢度。頭先 Mr. Prescott 咧就話嗰個合理武力嗰度咧，佢哋係會有 guideline 啦，咁我當然係希望管理局要將呢啲守則指引係公開俾我哋睇得到，佢係點樣去詮釋合理武力啦，否則我哋今日喺呢度過都係唔得嘅。雖然頭先 Mr. Prescott 講明佢一定唔會係有裝備，definitely not armed officer， 咁就一定係我估你最多都係有對講機，最多都係整個CCTV cam 即拍即錄，等你第日做證據啊呢啲咁嘅嘢，呢啲唔係攻擊性嘅裝備，最多就係咁樣樣。咁而家就有一類人啦，頭先Mr. Prescott 講咗就叫做 Park Ambassador。咁我都唔知中文係乜嘢。咁可唔可以管理局向我哋提供翻資料？而家已經有嘅呢一類執勤 嘅人員叫做 Park Ambassador 嘅人，佢哋究竟係嗰個入職嘅條件係乜嘢？佢哋嗰個工作性質而家係點樣？咁我哋有個底知道，即係你將來如果係靠呢一批 Park Ambassador 去執行秩序、維持秩序嘅時候，即係喺嗰度有個基礎俾我哋去睇得到咯。咁呢個即係請管理局提供資料啊。
好嘛，提供資料。
Thank you. What I suggest is we'll give you the information, the training requirements for our park ambassadors and that sort of thing. So we'll provide that to members at the next meeting. I can say very briefly, they're very much about having a presence in the park. They're about being obvious so they can help people. We've used the word ambassador because we want that notion of people being able to interpret and inform, help them, guide them, tell them how, if they want to find where the toilets are, where to go. So they're a source of information. There are obviously eyes and ears in the park for us as well. Yes, we will have CCTV, but CCTV is not a very effective way to on-the-spot deal with issues. You need people on the spot, and that's where our park ambassadors come in. They will, of course, be supplemented by a certain small number of security guards. But as we're already doing, the security guards generally are employed for events. So they help to control the event, not the park generally. So that we're making a distinction already between the sort of need for control and the need for information. But I will provide that information at the next meeting.
主席，咁個編制都重要嘅。其實我哋即係當初去睇呢個管理局佢哋做附例嘅時候咧，我哋調翻轉頭亦都關心管理局有冇咁多嘅資源去請咁多人嚟維持秩序。
呢個 admin 嘢嚟㗎喎。係啦。咁唔應該係法例嘢喎。呢
個唔係法例，不過我哋擔心佢點執行呢條法例啫。
咁我諗喺西九小組嗰度你提出啦。
係啦，我哋都擔心佢點樣執行呢條法例。
我諗我哋主要都
同埋主席，即係另外一樣咧。
連邊間你都要理埋，我諗咪理唔掂。
唔係我哋唔會理佢呢啲，但係就呢個關乎法例係邊度咧？就係如果佢哋人手好有限嘅時候咧，咁我哋想象之中佢處理唔到一啲嚴重啲嘅，或者係有啲規模嘅秩序維持嘅需要啊嘛，咁我想管理局話翻俾我哋聽，你喺召警求援，即係我相信你一定有呢個需要嘅，即係如果喺嗰個地界上邊係出現罪案啊，或者其他你普通 Park Ambassador 處理唔到，甚至係你請嘅護衛公司都處理唔到嘅情況嘅時候，咁你某一個情況就要召警求援，即係好似我哋立法會呢度咁，即係我哋自己嘅保安都未必所有嘢都處理到噶嘛，要揾警察幫手啊嘛。咁我就需要西九管理局話俾我哋聽，你嗰個 guideline 喺邊度啦？即係幾時係邀請警方入去啦？定抑或係其實你即係恆常已經有個機制同食環啊、警方啊嗰啲，即係大家去溝通。於是乎你寫喺呢度呢套守則係能夠有效地執行，但係又唔會過分地去干預使用呢個公園嘅居民咯。
咁呢啲你唔會喺個法例度寫到嘅，呢啲 in-house rule 佢哋自己寫㗎啦。係，我哋就係關心佢點樣執行到呢啲例咯。咁我呢啲就留翻喺行政裏邊講咯。譬如話你有啲嘢講唔晒㗎喎，你係嘛？喂，佢帶隻龜嚟，原來隻龜係稀有動物。唔係咁你咪要揾食環署嚟執咯。我又唔贊成你嗰個 approach，因為即係嗱，我哋睇呢啲法例，睇呢啲守則。我哋都要諗下佢點樣執行噶嘛。咁好啊，咁咪不如你大概下次叫住Mr. Pascal 咧，就話翻俾我哋聽。如果遇到佢哋唔係佢哋嘅範圍，或者佢哋能力做唔到嘅時候，佢哋會點做嗰個大致嘅守則點啦？好唔好啊？係咯，即係你喺邊一點，你會揾警察入嚟，就交俾警察去處理。咁呢啲我哋都想。即係喺邊個程度你會咁做？下次報告翻。OK。好，陳志全。
係其實我都係問執法嘅問題，但係我就係針對翻條例裏邊寫咗嘅第3部公眾行為。公眾行為裏邊呢13(1) 就有 A 至 M 咁多樣寫得好清楚嘅唔容許嘅行為，如果觸犯咗呢，就可以處第1級嘅罰款嘅。我就想問嗰個執法過程係點？譬如大小便、吐痰、行乞咁呢啲，你係咪個 Park Ambassador 見到佢或者勸喻，到你決定要罰佢，即係決定要執法，你就有權問佢攞身份證，跟住抄低咗，就佢嘅聯絡就可以即係法庭傳票，跟住就上庭就去罰錢，係咪咁樣去執行呢？啊，好，
Mr. Chairman, yes, I mean, the list here is intended for clarity so that people know what we regard as antisocial behaviour, basically. As far as the action, again, let me stress this is based on our existing practice in the nursery park. We found that when we approach people to explain the situation to them, we very rarely get a problem. People do respond positively to that approach. So where we've had people, for example, smoking in the park ambassadors will go up and say, look, sorry, there is a smoking area, would you mind moving to the smoking area? And actually they will. People are very good. And I think this is the philosophy we want to trust people to be sensible in the situations. The problem is there comes an occasion where someone won't respond to that. And that's where you need to have the additional power of being able to, if necessary, request them to come with you, to detain them. And as we'll describe at the next meeting, if necessary, call in the police. But we don't want to get to that situation. If you've reached that situation, it's already escalated. So the philosophy is to try and de-escalate by approaching them in a positive way. And our experience is that that works. But in order for our staff and for members of the public to be aware of the situation that's not acceptable, we felt that it was important to list in the bylaws those issues that would be the subject of that sort of intervention. So, for example, annoying to one person may not be annoying to another person. So how do you interpret it? And that's where the training for the park ambassadors comes in. We want to train our people to have the right approach, so that from the very first time they go into the park, they know how to approach people, how to address them, to be very respectful, to be very recognizing they're trying to enjoy themselves as much as every other user of the park. So that's the philosophy.
OK， 陳志全。
主席，我明白係個勸喻會行先，但係你寫咗喺嗰個附例嗰度呢，我就想你講翻你會點執啊？譬如大小便咁，而家香港都話成日有啲咁嘅中港矛盾。如果有客見到有人大咗便已經發生咗，跟住去投訴，跟住如果真係要你去執法，咁你會唔會去執法？你個執法係點樣？係要召警求助至可以執法啦，定係你可以抄低佢身份證就已經可以事後去告佢？我係想問翻個程序嗰個可能性啫。
We can if necessary, yes. The powers are provided for under the bylaws to allow us to do that. And obviously, if it were a case that we had someone that was coming in and deliberately doing that, we would have to take action, perhaps even calling in the police to take action under the relevant general laws of Hong Kong. But, you know, those situations... 我就想問係咪一定要召警先？譬如啲 A 至 M 呢啲，如果你真係覺得唔接受、唔容許佢勸喻咗，佢都唔去改善，你都係要召警先至可以去執行呢一啲跟住先可以再令佢上庭啊咁咧。 No, we don't have to call in the police. We can take action. We can prosecute under these bylaws ourselves. We can issue that sort of action. So we don't have to call in the police. I'm talking about when it gets out of hand. Then we always have recourse to the police, just as anyone else would. What I'm describing is that we don't want to be confronting people. That's not the purpose of our approach. But if necessary, we take the name and we will prosecute, and we can do that.
我諗講得好清楚啦，佢哋會做先嘅，因為每個情況都唔同，每件 case 等到佢不可能處理嘅先會揾警察嘅啫。何秀蘭。
係主席啊，嗱確實咧就呢套附例咧，比康文署嗰啲咧就好啲啦，即係又冇講到話唔準隨草地瞓啊，唔準唱歌啊，唔準跳舞啊嗰啲各樣嘢。咁但係咧，雖則你唔準嘅嘢咧就少過康文署，但係調翻轉頭咧就係、如果要做其他嘢咧，就要得到你書面准許。咁呢，即係呢度其實我哋又唔知道你嗰個權力係有幾大喎，因為嗱你即係譬如好似第10條咁，即係舉行活動咁呢個舉行活動即係點解呢？因為一舉行活動就要得到你書面嘅准許啊嘛嚇。咁呢啲活動係大定係細嘅活動呢？ 比如下低你都有講話就呢個活動你要有支架啊、攤位啊、平台啊、展品，咁大家就會諗呢啲係咪即係好似美酒佳肴節啊嗰啲咁樣樣，即係有埋火啊、煮食啊嗰啲，即係有特別嘅准許啦。但係一啲細型啲嘅活動，比如即係大家想像，你而家將女人街搬咗去西九，咁呢啲當唔當活動呢？嗰邊係啦，嗰邊就係打太極。當然有音樂㗎啦，並且好大聲嗰啲啦嚇。呢邊就法輪功練功，嗰邊呢就跳大媽舞咁嚇。咁呢啲活動，我哋常人理解都係活動嚟㗎嘛，係嘛？雖則佢未必需要話整支架攤位咁多，但係一定係有音響啊。咁你呢啲係咪都要你書面准許，然後先正可以做呢？咁究竟如果冇書面准許喺呢個公園裏邊可以做嘅嘢，其實係幾多呢？即係我擔心你，雖則你唔係好似康文署咁話呢樣不準嗰樣不準，但係反為康文署嗰啲由1數到20嘅不準呢，我哋睇到有邊啲不準喎？因為而家調翻轉頭呢，要得你書面准許先正準，嗰度就係 inexhaustive。咁你可唔可以解翻即係俾我哋聽係即係你嗰個範圍係點樣拿捏呢？
Okay. Mr. Pesco.
Mr. Chairman, again, based on the experience we've already had running the park for 8 months, ad hoc events, people turning up and playing guitar among themselves, not a problem. We would never have an issue with that. Events involving cooking, yes, we would require a permit for that because of the safety issues. So that's basically the distinction we make. But we've now run the park, the nursery park, for over 8 months. We have very clear guidelines on the usage of the park, which are, again, on our website if people want to know. For events, we've had everything from running and sports events through to clock and flap, through to free space happening every other week, to small events. We've had the Doraemon run recently. We've got events coming up. We assess them. When people approach us for information, we talk to them, we assess the event, and then we take a view. So far, it's worked very well. We've been able to accommodate a wide range of different types of event. And always, our primary concern is safety for all park users, not just the event attendees. Protection of the park, because, of course, it is natural environment. You need to be able to make sure that it isn't overused. So you don't want too many events back to back, so we need to control it for that purpose. And also, you may have 2 or 3 events happening at once, so you need to make sure that they are in appropriate locations. So these are the considerations that we apply. But honestly, it's a dynamic situation. It's a managed situation to allow as much flexibility as possible, which is why we have not prescribed. And I think it would be wrong if we were to take that approach of LCSD, which is fine for that sort of operation, but we want to be different. And the approach that we've taken based on our own experience of not prescribing in a whole list what's possible, what's not possible, allows us much more flexibility and freedom. And if people have come to us with a proposal and we discuss it, and we usually have been able to resolve dates, times, etc., to suit both ourselves, the other park users, and the prospective user. So that's the approach.
主席，我就好同意頭先梁家傑議員咧提出嚟喺翻主體法例嗰度咧，即係佢有個 mission statement 嗰度嚇，咁我就好同意佢個講法嘅。其實我哋而家制定呢套附例咧，最好咧就係喺即係一開宗明義嗰度咧，就係講明呢套附例嘅制定同埋執行都要符合翻主體法例裏邊西九管理局嗰個mission statement， 咁呢。就於是乎，大家喺詮釋，即係將來或者你有什麼司法行動啊，或者其他爭拗嘅時候啦，喺詮釋呢組附例嘅時候呢，就已經開宗明義喺埋呢個附例裏邊，即係大家睇得到，你係要符合西九管理局一成立開始嘅時候嗰一套嘅職能同埋個願景。咁我希望政府係可以做呢個修訂咯。
有個依據。係啊。我諗咧，大家都提咗好好嘅意見，但係跟住下次嘅會議咧，我哋喺主體法喺呢個法例裏修訂法例裏邊討論嘅時候咧，都係講都會討論翻我哋好關注嗰啲可以比較詳細啲去討論大家所關心嗰啲，好嘛？咁我哋暫時今日咧，如果冇其他特別嘅嘢，我哋呢個議程就完結咗。
咁就請局方即係提供我哋頭先攞嗰啲資料啦。
OK， 咁我哋想係而家繼續審議嗰啲法例咧，因為下次先審啦。不過我見人太少，都要下次㗎啦，係嘛？雖然我哋係早咗收工啫，咁但係喺收工之前咧，我哋都仲有一個其他事項咧，就係想話大家覺得需唔需要我哋要有一個諮詢公眾嘅諮詢咧，聽下其他人對呢個附例或者使用呢個公園嗰個意見。如果需要嘅時候，我哋就安排。需唔需要啊？兩位？主席要啊嚇。要啊，好。
即係雖則我理解管理局都應該諮詢咗好多㗎啦，咁但係即係好多時咧就官方機構嘅諮詢，唔知點解嚟到立法會呢度咧，市民嚟講嗰啲意見咧又有啲唔同，有啲出入嘅。咁我覺得我哋都要聽一次嘅。好，冇問題。咁咧，我哋如果係能夠再擬定開會嘅時間咧，就係4月18號嚇上晝10:09個字度，呢就有時間。咁睇睇大家擇低呢個時間好嘛？咁咧就係開會嘅。另外，我哋諮詢嘅時間係咪另外再定啊？或者我哋夾埋啊，好嘛？因為而家你知都好逼迫啦。少人我哋繼續做埋逐條審議啊，咁。係咯。如果個少人，我哋就跟住就逐條審議啦，好嘛？或者我哋都定一個時間，或者係佢睇都唔會，我相信都唔會突然間多咗幾十人咁去嘅嚇。有需要嘅時候，我哋再加時啦。如果唔係，我哋就同埋嗰日就聽埋公眾意見先，至係逐條審議，好冇？好。如果大家都同意咧，咁我哋就暫定4月18號再開會。咁如果冇其他事項咧，咁我哋今日嘅會議結束。多謝各位出席。Thank you.